I saw this was popping off on Twitter. It was popping off on Instagram. It was popping off everywhere. Somebody went on Piers Morgan's show after he had on Ben Shapiro, who, you know, I don't think I exactly agree with Ben Shapiro's interpretation of Israeli-Palestinian history. And so Piers Morgan, according to him, wanted to get a fuller perspective of what's going on there. And so he brought on somebody on the other side of the conversation here, Bassem Youssef, to talk about how Palestinians are treated and the ongoing violence between Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Israel, and of course the violence along the Lebanese border. I heard that I saw a few clips of it. I heard this gets pretty intense. I heard this guy gives a lot of pushback, and I heard this is one of his better interviews. Not in Piers Morgan showed his chops, but as in, you know, they brought a perspective onto the show that they don't hear often. And so I'm very interested. Not to mention it starts with this warning: the video contains swearing. So, hey, maybe YouTube will demonetize me twice for this one. By the way, demonetized on YouTube. Support me at DylanBurns.tv, DylanBurns.tv. Drop a dono, drop a sub. Maybe I'll respond to your comments. Also, DylanBurns TV on Patreon. Let's get started.
Well, joining me now to discuss the conflict in Israel and Gaza is a TV host and satirist, Bassem Youssef. Bassem, it's great to have you back on the program. I wish it was under different circumstances. First of all, what is your reaction to what happened on October the 7th?
Oh, it was terrible, of course. I mean, we kind of get our news kind of also secondhand because, you know, my wife's family, they live in Gaza. They have cousins and uncles there. And their house also was bombed. We haven't been able to communicate with them for the past 3 days. Communication are lost. So we don't know actually what is the, how are they doing, but you know.
Also, for those of you reaching out to YouTube support under my tweets about this, I appreciate it. But when you do it, please don't cuss at them. I've seen, you guys are vicious, okay? It always looks, it always feels like you're responding to Vladimir Putin himself. The ruder you are, the less likely they are to respond to it. Okay, just be polite, always be nice, make sugar your favorite spice. Sorry, we'll return to this.
We're used to that. I mean, it's just like, it's very repetitive. We're used to that. We're used to them being bombed every time and moving from one place to the other. You know, it's just like those Palestinians, they're very dramatic. Israel killing us. But they never die. I mean, they always come back. You know, they're very difficult to kill, very difficult people to kill. I know because I'm married to one. I tried many times, couldn't kill her.
I mean, there's a dark humor there, and I understand why. Because
no, it's not dark humor. I try to get to her every time, but she uses our kids as human shields. I can never take her out.
Again, I understand the humor, but to be serious, Bassem, about this. Tonight, there is.
I will be serious. Now, I will be serious. I was watching your interview with Ben Shapiro.
I gotta say, man, it's hard for me to enjoy a lot of modern comedy because I don't know. Maybe I like Norm Macdonald. I like a very, you know, I like a type of comedy that isn't super mainstream SNL type. I mean, Norm Macdonald wasn't on SNL, but he was kicked off of SNL for a reason. It was because he was too funny. Joking, but that lines up right in my comedy sphere. Okay, he's hitting my buttons perfectly.
And I'll tell you one thing.
Yeah,
I think that Ben Shapiro is one of the smartest people who ever walked this earth. He's very, very smart. I follow him, and I believe everything he said. And when he came on your show, his solution was, and I quote, his solution was that the solution for this is for Israel to annex Gaza and to kill as many son of bitches as possible to make sure that this will never happen again. And anyone who called for a ceasefire will be a terrorist sympathizer. So God forbid, I don't want to be labeled as a terrorist sympathizer. So I agree with Ben Shapiro. I think we should kill as many son of bitches as possible.
Well, let me, so far, but Bassem,
so far, 3,500 people were killed, including 5,000 son of bitches in the bombing of the Baptist hospital as we speak right now.
I think he said 5,000. I think he meant 500. Now the number is 471. Don't know if it'll change.
1/3 of those 3,500 were
from the Gaza Health Ministry, which is Hamas controlled, but still, we don't have a completely clear picture yet on the ground.
Children. So my question to Ben Shapiro is, how many more son of bitches do we need to kill so Ben Shapiro is happy?
Okay,
because it changes from
Bassem,
one year. It changes from one. I'm sorry that. Listen, I'm really at a disadvantage here. I'm looking at a camera. I don't see you. I can hear you on my.
The reason I'm interrupting is I think it might be. I think you're conflating different interviews with Ben Shapiro. He didn't use the phrase "sons of bitches" with me. Let me play to you what he actually said on my.
He did. Go back to your interview.
No, he didn't. That was another interview. But let me play what he said to me here.
Well, frankly, I don't believe in proportionate responsibility.
By the way, the part of the reason why, and somebody just said this in gutter chat, part of the reason why I like this type of comedy is he just plays it perfectly straight. He plays it perfectly straight. I like, comedians can laugh at their jokes every once in a while, but when you play it straight and people just have to deal with that, love it.
Terrorism. I believe that the way that you stop terrorism is with wildly disproportionate response. That doesn't mean in terms of targeting civilians. It means in terms of killing as many terrorists as humanly possible and allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement by hiding behind civilians in areas that they are supposedly responsible for means that the only option for Israel is to surrender to Hamas's hatred of its own citizens, its willingness to use its own children as human shields. No country worth its salt could ever do that.
Now, that is substantively different to what you said he said, right? He's talking there specifically about Hamas terrorists.
I agree with him. The thing is, the question is, what is a proportionate response? Because it has been different from one tier to another. So if you look to this graph, for example, this is the death of Israeli and Palestinians, and it's changing from one year to year. It's like fluctuating like crypto. So my question is today, what is the going rate today for human lives? I mean, 2014 was a great year for Ben Shapiro. 88 Israelis were died, and there was 2,329 Palestinians killed on the other side. That is one Israeli for 27 Palestinians. That is a very good exchange rate. What I'm saying is, what is the exchange rate for today? So you guys will be happy. That's my question.
My goodness. Well, maybe the plan by the Israeli Authority is to make it so that it's like the ruble, and it's like, I think the exchange rate for the ruble is like 100 for $1, and maybe if they race, they can go under that or undercut it. God, dude, who is that? I've never been familiar with this guy's work. I have to look. I actually need to, I need to remember this guy's name, actually. I'm going to go see if he has any comedy specials.
Well, it's not me, guys. I'm not on either side.
No, not you. Like, when I say you guys, I say like people on the other side of that. I know that you don't think like that, Piers. You're one of the good guys. But let me tell you something. I mean, the reason that I'm using this is that, I mean, I can't remember what happened in 2014.
You worked with Jon Stewart? I can see that.
And there was no music festival, but there must be something. I mean, they must do something. It is their fault. It has to be something. I mean, 2018, 300 Palestinians died. Who's counting? So the thing is, what my question is, let's find what is the exchange rate for human life today, so we expect the future death of Palestinians, and we'll be happy to it.
My response to that would be this, Bassem. I've thought carefully about this because I think it's very tricky for people like me to immerse ourselves into a conflict where we're not directly involved. And I thought carefully about what I feel about this. I feel that the scale of what Hamas did on October the 7th supersedes anything else I've seen in this conflict, really ever. The savagery, the butchery, the slaughter of 1,300 people, the shooting of babies, the 100%. Kidnapping of grandmothers, and so on. So,
I mean, at the very least, it's like it was one of the worst attacks, or one of the most it was the most violent day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. I'd have to go back like to 1948 and look exactly how many people died during the expulsion period. But either way, one of the worst, if not the worst day for Israelis in the entirety of the conflict.
So if
what was it that Joe Biden said? 15 9/11s, because 9/11 is now the metric of measurement that we're using, or 0.05 Holocausts, 0.08 Armenian genocides.
If we can agree on that, which I think is inarguable, then the question then becomes again about proportion. I don't disagree that there's been a lot of bad stuff on both sides going back historically for decades. But if we agree that this was on a different level altogether, quite deliberately by Hamas, designed to provoke. No, here's my question. Let me ask you a question. And the question, because you raised it earlier about proportion. I honestly don't know what the proportionate response is. I honestly don't. I don't. I've been watching the airstrikes this week thinking...
So what's your question?
Well, I would ask you, if you were Israel, what would you...
If I was Israel.
If you were Israel and that had happened to you, what would you think would be the appropriate way for the country to respond?
I would do exactly like Israel did, kill as many people as possible, since the world is letting me do it. I mean, I can do it because I can, you know. But the thing is, like, you know what? I agree with you. And you know what? I'm going to be even ahead of you, because I see the question coming. Do you condemn Hamas for the atrocity? Yes, I condemn Hamas. I condemn Hamas. Hamas is the source of all evil. They're a reason for everything. And you know what? Let's, for a minute...
By the way, for those of you who are interested, if I was made Mr. Israel, right, I had a giant Star of David on my chest, big cape, right? I came to all the little boys' birthday parties and delivered hummus, whatever Mr. Israel's superhero role is. And they're like, Mr. Israel, Dylan Burns, Dr. Israel, Captain Israel, what will you do to end this conflict forever? My solution would be, and this is the big brain stuff. And of course, I'm doing what Piers Morgan said. I'm putting myself into a conflict I'm not a party to. But wouldn't it make sense, if you wanted to target Hamas, is that you have to target their support base? Definitely, if this is an organization that would be perfectly willing to go into exile or turn down later down the road, wouldn't you want to give maybe some victories to their opponents? I mean, it's not like Netanyahu doesn't understand this concept before. He talked about it in meetings in 2019. That you want to kind of split the opposition. When the Israelis left the Gaza Strip in 2006, 2007, the government was pretty open about the fact that they're going to try to have this conflict go in perpetuity by splitting the bases of support amongst the different Palestinian camps. So wouldn't it make sense, if you wanted to undercut Hamas, that you would want to give some sort of victory to Fatah or any of the other factions? For example, an end to the occupation in the West Bank. You can go after the people who did the attacks in southern Israel. All of them deserve to be brought to justice. You can do everything possible to retrieve those who are still kidnapped. I know that Hamas has said that if the bombing stops, they will release the hostages. I have no clue if that's true, but find some way to get the hostages out, whether it's through raids, which are going to be extremely risky and will probably lead to some of the hostages dying. Who knows, it'll be the majority or not. Or if it's through negotiated settlement or ceasefire. Point is, though, you want to undercut support for Hamas or organizations like Hamas, like Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who could take their place, by trying to make other organizations using alternative methods outside of violence more successful. Negotiation, more successful. Make a boss the hero. And look, he's corrupt. Fatah is terribly corrupt. A lot of Palestinians don't like them because of that. But if you start delivering them real victories against illegal occupation, that's a good argument against Hamas. That's a really good argument against Hamas. So it would also mean that the Israelis would probably be able to divert military resources, which they currently have defending illegal settlements. They could divert some of those resources to protect the border in Gaza, which, if they had more troops on the border in Gaza, maybe the slaughter that happened in southern Israel wouldn't be so bad. It was Benjamin Netanyahu's government who built the security structure that they currently have in Israel. If you built the security structure and you're the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history, that's a problem with your security arrangement. That's a problem with your administration. And they need to take a radically different approach to dealing with Israel's security than the one they're taking now. Because this in perpetuity thing isn't working. It isn't working at all.
Burns is
imagine a world without Hamas.
Right.
What will this world look like? Let's give this word a name, and let's name this word the West Bank. Hamas has absolutely no control in the West Bank, and since the beginning...
I swear to God I didn't pre-watch. I swear to God I didn't pre-watch it. This guy stole it from me. Hey, he stole it from me. I said it first. Charlotte, thanks for the tier 1.
Think of this street. Only through August, 37 Palestinian kids were killed. No music festival, no paragliding, no Hamas. Since the occupation of the West Bank, 7,000 Palestinians were killed. No music festival, no paragliding, no Hamas. I can go on and on and on and on.
No, but you don't need to, because in a way.
Wait, raid from Lonerbox. Bonerbox, you rat bastard cuck. I love you, buddy. Thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate it. Yo, Lonerbox has been popping off recently. You know, I gotta say that he's been doing really good. His commentary about this war has been top tier, and I'm happy that people are listening to people who either have studied the conflict to some degree beforehand and have some ties to the region, instead of just, I don't know, people who are putting $10,000 bets on the bodies of Palestinian kids. I'm not naming names. I'm just saying. I'm really happy that he's getting some positive attention, because he deserves it. He deserves it. I know that he likes to spend the majority of his time doing the long form content, and or at least trying to work on those big video essays. He's a pretty good streamer.
Morally corrupt, bankrupt.
He's a pretty good streamer. I mean, he still has a British passport, but he's a good streamer, man. Beldurance, thank you so much for the primer. Appreciate it. Boxbulla says hi. Is that what we're calling him now? Boxbulla? Thank you, Boxbulla. I appreciate it. Hey, everybody, we're watching this debate and conversation, whatever you want to call it, between Piers Morgan and this guy who's actually quite funny, Youssef.
The way you're preaching to the choir, I've followed this crisis.
Oh no, you're not preaching. So the thing is, like,
well, in the sense that I know that what you're saying has validity. Of course.
Piers. By the way, Piers. I am at a disadvantage here. I can hear you. I cannot see you. I am in a claustrophobic room, and so please cut me some slack and don't interrupt me and interrupt my point.
Sure.
So because this has to be fair.
Understand.
Because if you want to only hear your opinion, I can just condemn Hamas and go home. I can do that. So do you want to do that, or do you have a much more nuanced conversation?
No, I absolutely want to have a nuanced conversation. I wasn't aware I was interrupting you. I thought I was letting you speak.
Amazing. So let's. I mean, I would say I really applaud Israel for doing one thing that no military force in the world does. Because I heard. I
should do that in an interview. If people are interrupting me too much, like, dude, I'm just gonna call Azov. I'm like, I need a ride out of it. This is just too much.
Ben Shapiro and I heard Ron DeSantis, and they said Israel is the only military force in the world that warns civilians before bombing them. I mean, how fucking cute. That is so nice of them. So, because with this logic, if Russian troops started warning Ukrainians before bombing their houses, we're cool with Putin, right? I mean, okay, Habibi, you have warned them, go invade. It's fine. You have done your job. I mean, the thing is, and I understand, and I also heard Ben.
Look, I understand his point that civilians are going to feel terrible no matter what if they have their home collapsed in on by Israeli bombs. Same thing applies here in Ukraine. I will say that there is a difference when it comes to the storage of weapons and munitions in civilian homes, in, for example, UN organized schools in Gaza, which has happened. And as far as we know, that has not been confirmed in Ukraine. There was that one Amnesty International report, which was not very good and didn't even confirm what we're talking about now. It's usually abandoned homes on the front line or abandoned schools or hospitals on the front line. But there is a key difference here. But I think the main point of the people are going to be mad if their home blows up, no matter if you gave them a warning or not. That is still true.
Shapiro talking about human shield. So you remember my wife's family, they live in Gaza. So I asked them, I told them, when Israel gives you the nice warning, the cute warning, does Hamas force you to stay in your home so you can be bombed and use as human shield? You know what, Hassan here, my wife's cousin, he's a loser, you know. He told me, you know, when I asked him, does that happen? He told me, no. The lying son of a bitch lied to me. I told him, you don't understand. Ben Shapiro and Ron DeSantis keep saying that Israel warned you and Hamas asked you to stay put. So I told you, he's a loser. He never kept a job. He even failed in all of the interviews to become like a human shield. I would believe Ben Shapiro.
Let me ask you this,
so let's go with that. No. Let me ask you
this. At some point, I must be able to ask you questions. It's not a monologue for you, Bassem.
If we agree that for the 14,000 casualties, I mean, who's counting, are human shield, does that mean that every single one of those civilians was standing, obscuring a military target behind them? Because that's a lot of weapons. I mean, Hamas is packing.
No, of course it doesn't. And look, you know,
so there's some collateral damage. Lots of collateral damage.
Yes,
it's fine. Yeah, you kill some to save some, and then kill some more. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this again. It comes back to proportionate response. When the world decided,
Grabs Pinch, thank you for the primer. Is his cousin's name actually Hassan, or does he know? No, his cousin is Hassan Avi, obviously.
It had to get rid of ISIS because of the appalling butchery they were carrying out. It did so by also killing, very sadly, a lot of civilians along.
Dude, the American bombing campaign in northeastern Syria was brutal. Like if the YPG called in a bombing raid, we did it, and those bombing raids were close to their positions, man. It was really brutal. And ISIS did use a lot of human shields, and that did contribute to the civilian death toll being higher. ISIS would deliberately use human shields, and they weren't even like scared to admit it, that they would do that openly. But our bombing campaign was also very brutal. And I do think that you could even critique certain elements of the bombing campaign, even if Operation Inherent Resolve to take out ISIS, I still think was necessary.
On the way by doing airstrikes against places which.
But killing civilians are inevitable. You said that in the beginning.
My point is,
it's inevitable.
Yeah, but once Israel has decided that they want to get rid of Hamas, and Hamas is embedded with civilian population, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen next. I've written a column tonight saying, I remember the Iraq War, which I opposed, right? I remember all this. So my question for you is, what would you think would be an appropriate response by Israel to what happened?
Well, these are years of disproportionate responses of Israel. Right. Did it solve the solution? Did it solve the problem? Did it work before, so it will work? What will be the surprise this time?
This is the point that I think people need to hit on more, right? Benjil76, thank you for the primer. This is the point people need to hit on more. At what point, what's the end game here? I think this is a simple question. What's the end game? Okay. Israel invades the Gaza Strip, says it doesn't want to occupy it. Hamas is kicked out, probably goes into exile. Then what? Do they leave? Okay, what stops Hamas from just coming back in? I mean, they've gone into exile before. Why not go into exile again and just come back? This happened in Afghanistan with the Taliban. We whooped their ass left, right, and center, and we really did smash them with the Northern Alliance, cross the border into Pakistan. They radicalized children in schools, bring them back across the border. Boom. They left their exile back for Afghanistan, and then we had the situation which led to our eventual withdrawal from the country. What's going to stop that from happening? What's the plan there? Are they going to engage in nation building at a pace necessary to undercut Hamas from rebuilding their support structures? Does that mean they're going to give Palestinian sovereignty and they're going to remove the blockade and help lower the unemployment rate, which pushes people into the arms of groups like Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas? Is that what they're going to do? Is Netanyahu's government going to be the one to do that? Do we trust Netanyahu's government to do that? There hasn't been an endgame displayed. And when we invaded Afghanistan, Barbara Lee was the one person who voted against it. Not because Barbara Lee didn't want to invade Afghanistan and grab al-Qaeda and the Taliban by the throat. The reason she didn't want to invade or voted against it was because she didn't believe we had an exit strategy. She didn't believe that we had a plan. And that's the thing that gets me, is what if Israel just does this whole invasion, takes over the Gaza Strip, rules over it for who knows how many years, before eventually leaving, and then we're back at square one and we've solved nothing. That assumes that their plan quite literally isn't to push everybody out and have them all flee into Egypt and cause another 2 million Palestinians to be displaced, and then they just gobble up the land. That assumes they don't engage in that, which would be ethnic cleansing. But I want to hear an end game from the Israeli government. If they're asking the American government to sign on to this invasion, to this military operation, they need to offer some sort of end game.
What will be the twist that will make this work this time? What will be different this time?
Let me just be clear. I don't trust Netanyahu's government to ever cover to manage any rebuilding process, nation building process, or even like the security of Israel. So I don't trust this government to do it. They've built up the security apparatus in Israel over the last 12 years. He's been in power for over a decade, longest serving prime minister in Israeli history, and he failed to protect his own citizens. And now he has IDF soldiers in meetings almost curb stomping him, yelling at him, saying this is your fault that everyone's dead. And who's he going to take that out on? He's not going to take that out on the Israelis. He's not going to take that out on IDF. He's going to take it out on the Palestinians. I just don't trust his government to do it. Definitely with psychos like Ben Gvir whispering in his ear.
Time. Seriously, I mean, like, this is only the last 15 years. I mean, because it's too many papers. I just got this. But how will this be different? And the thing is, I am so glad in the introduction that you mentioned the Iraq war. I applaud you, Piers, for saying that, because you were honest about it. You said that spreading lies like WMDs make people look at those people as less of humans, and they would accept the death of 1 million Iraqi, whether by sanctions or by invasion, right? You are a good man. This is amazing. And you know what is similar? Is when you spread the lies of 40 decapitated babies, although it was refuted. So what happens when people hear that, you know, killing babies is horrible. But when you say decapitated 40 babies, you are planting a certain image,
well,
with a certain trigger in people's mind.
Who has said that? Who has said 40?
Who has said that? You have said 40 decapitated.
Who has said that?
You have repeated.
No, I haven't.
What?
I've never said that.
You haven't said on your show 40 decapitated babies?
Never.
Ben Shapiro didn't say it?
No.
Ron DeSantis didn't say it?
Nobody has said
it. Okay, Piers,
no,
nobody said it?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I am wrong. Decapitated. Here's
you're wrong. I've never said that.
The thing, what happened, no, you're wrong. But the thing is, when Iraq, the thing is, the same thing is happening in Iraq. Ben Shapiro once tweeted, not even about Gaza, about the West Bank, when Israel continued to build the illegal settlement. He said, 2017, Israel likes to build things, and Arabs, not Palestine, not Hamas, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage.
Yeah, I thought that was very
the Israeli defense minister, he said, those are human animals. And the thing is,
bro is obsessed with Shapiro. Well, Shapiro was on his show like a week before, like a few days before, and I think that's part of the reason why he's concentrating on it. But if you want to go into Shapiro's history, he's wrote a lot of articles where he talks about like the black heart of the Palestinian people. It is not a very, you know, doesn't paint his heart in a good light.
Ben Shapiro should know better, because, you know, long before the Holocaust, before Jewish people were thrown in the gas chambers, the Nazi propaganda called them rats. Now, as a human being, I will never accept that another human being being thrown into a gas chamber, but a rat, kill 10, kill 1,000, 3,500. They are son of a bitch. They are human animals who live in open sewage and decapitate babies. And because of that propaganda, Mr. Morgan, that guy in Illinois, the 71-year-old guy, he killed, stabbing the 6-year-old Palestinian kid in Illinois 26 times. And he used to play with him. They used to be friends. But he went in, marching into their apartment, stabbing his mother and killing him, shouting, all Muslims could die.
Yeah.
It took you 80 years to change one word from Jewish to Muslim. And then you transferred your guilt to us and took away our land.
Bassem, let me ask you a question.
That deal sucks, man.
Let me ask you a question. How do we get from where we are now to peace? Well,
first of all, you need to change the perception. Nikki Haley, the American presidential candidate, said, we are in Israel in this because it's a fight between good and evil. Now, if you already decided someone is good, he can do no evil. And if you decided someone is evil, it's good to kill them. Killing them is good. You see, and the thing is, it is not like something new. I mean, I look at history and I see, I'm sorry to say this, but Westerners has always dealt like this with indigenous people. You first treated them like savages, you know, Native American, First Nation, Aboriginal. They're savages. Kill all the savages. And then when they're almost extinct, you start feeling sorry for them, you know, like animals. So maybe the solution is that we kill as many Palestinians as possible, so the few of them that remains do not bother you. And maybe Netanyahu, when he lives for another 100 years, he'll become a tree hugger.
Let me just challenge you on this.
And he will campaign for
preserving the three Palestinians. You keep talking about Westerners like me. Okay, so let me return the favor, okay? Hamas is dedicated to the complete eradication of Jewish people.
I am not the spokesman for Hamas.
I'm not saying you are.
Why do you get...
I'm not saying you are.
Their spokesman.
You're talking to me.
I fucking hate them.
Bassem,
fuck Hamas.
You are
Hamas.
No,
are you happy?
You're missing my point.
By the way, you see how easy that is? You see how easy, you see how unbelievably easy it is? Fuck Hamas. Move on. Let's talk about something else. Fuck Hamas. So easy. So easy to drop that out there. And this person has family in the Gaza Strip, okay? A lot different than the people who grew up in Philadelphia, has never even left the United States ever in their life, and are somehow trying to find some backwards way to say, well, they were settlers. By the way, that part of southern Israel, they were not settlers. They were people dancing at a music festival. They were settlers, so it's different, and actually they could be conscripted at any time, so it's actually totally fine to mow down civilians. It's so easy. Just be like, yeah, that's awful and horrible, and just done. You're done. You don't need to find some backwards way to make your movement look worse by endorsing the mowing down of babies and children and anyone. Don't do that.
You're talking in a generalized way about people in the West who always talk about Arabs as savages. I don't.
No. I'm talking about America.
I actually led the campaign. I led the media campaign in this country against the Iraq War. Okay, so I don't see. I don't see people in the Middle East as savages.
You
but what
are
I would
one
say
of
is,
the good ones.
But what I would say is,
talking about you. You're great.
No, it's not about me being
amazing.
great.
We love you.
It's about the way Hamas behaved on October the 7th was like savages. Like a pack of savages. It was the worst atrocity against Jewish people since the Holocaust. There has to be,
of course,
there has to be a response. And my question
should be eradicated.
My question for you is, notwithstanding the history, Bassem, what is the proportionate response?
But I don't know. But there's no Hamas in the West Bank, and they're still dying there. So what's your excuse?
I don't have any excuse.
Okay, what's your explanation? Sorry, my earpiece went down.
Listen, I don't make any pretense that this hasn't been a massive problem between Palestine and Israel going back to the mid-40s. We all know this, right?
Piers, listen. I'm not saying that you're making excuses, but if you are adopting a certain point of view, you have to at least defend it. I'm telling you, there is no Hamas in the West Bank. What is the excuse? Not your excuse. What is the excuse to kill those people?
Well, listen, this question of proportionality is one that...
No.
See, this is not a proportionality question because Hamas isn't in the West Bank. That's Fatah. That's a boss's hood, okay? That isn't Hamas's hood. That's not a Palestinian Islamic Jihad's hood. When you see settlers, and I've reposted the footage of this, going up to Palestinians, hitting them with the butt of their gun, shooting them in the stomach, these far-right radical settlers who are trying to take more and more and more Palestinian territory illegally, and the most resistance you're likely going to get out there is rocks being thrown back at the settlers that stole their homes. Yeah, no, you cannot connect this to Hamas. You cannot connect this to the issue of proportionality. I mean, settler violence is getting out of control in the West Bank. It's always been out of control, but it's getting more out of control than ever.
Answer my question. I've been answering your question. You answer mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. It's not.
Okay, not your job.
Not.
I agree with you.
I'm more interested in you, who has family in Gaza, who's an Egyptian in the Middle East, right? I'm more interested in what you have to say.
Okay, I'm telling you. I think Hamas is the problem. Okay,
right
now let's say Hamas is removed. Let's Hamas. I'm agreeing with everything. You want me to condemn Hamas? I will condemn Hamas, Hummus, Hassan, everybody. Guys, so wait. I can't hear you. The earpiece. Damn. Okay. Oops. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I do need help.
I think.
Okay.
Just go back. Is he there?
You go back.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Go. Thank you, guys.
Can you hear Bassem?
Yeah. Now I can hear you.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Can you hear? Okay. So let's say, for example, Hamas ceased to exist. Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hamas ceased to exist today. Now, right now, in Palestine, in West Bank and Gaza, 20% of Palestinians go through Israeli prison system, whether imprisonment, whether interrogation, whether torture. And the rest of them, they live a life of daily loss of land, of homes, of life, and they are suffocated by this. So let me ask you something. If you are a Palestinian living in these conditions for decades, would you sympathize with your oppressor, or sympathize with the people who claim they resist them even if they are terrorists?
I have made no secret that I think the conditions Palestinians have had to exist under are completely unacceptable. I've said that for years. So the question then becomes, how do you forge peace between two warring parts of that region who for decades have approached peace, in my view, with mutual sledgehammers, with no actual desire to have peace? And I think it comes down in the end to great leadership. And I don't think there's great leadership. I don't think, well, hang on, let me make my point. I don't think there's great leadership on either side. Where is the Nelson Mandela figure here to come through all this hatred on both sides?
Nelson Mandela?
Yeah, where is that figure?
Nelson Mandela actually have criticized Israel for being a horrible state. All of the South African activists have actually called Israel.
My point is about how he responded to a country that was so divided is a template for how you get to peace, isn't it?
I haven't met Nelson Mandela, so I wouldn't know. But like there is a point. There's a very important point here. You know, I want to understand what is the logic of Israel carpet bombing Gaza. I mean, if there's a logic, if this will make Israel safe, I want to hear the logic. So if they continue bombing, what are they hoping to achieve?
Well, I think we know what their stated aim is. Their stated aim is to eradicate.
Yes. By the way, part of the reason that there's not like a Nelson Mandela type figure, Abbas is not that, is because the Israeli government did want to, and this isn't just the Israeli government's fault. This is also the fault of different Palestinian factions. Wanted to divide the different Palestinian groups so they would not coalesce into one union that would then be easier for them, or coalesce into different coalitions that would then be easier to challenge the Israeli state central authority.
Wipe out Hamas. They believe Hamas are living predominantly in northern Gaza. They also are aware they're living amongst civilians. So it's an incredibly difficult thing. As I said in my monologue, you know, it is very, very difficult to see how they do this.
At DylanBurnsTV, Biden also pressed officials about their overall strategy in Gaza, namely what Israel's plan for the enclave would be after the war. That is what he should be doing. Did he get an answer? Did we have any report in the Axios article about Netanyahu's response? Like, oh, this is our plan? Because they still have yet to see one. Their plan is we're going to kill Hamas, and then that's it. Sounds a lot like what we sounded like before we invaded Afghanistan.
Without massive collateral damage.
So if I can understand this correctly, basically Israel is doing this to pressure the Palestinian community in Gaza to turn against Hamas. Is that right?
I'm sure that's part of it, yes.
That's part of it. So this is exactly what terrorist organizations do, because terrorist organizations will have no chance beating a whole nation in battle. So they terrorize and they kill the civilians in order to spread fear and terror so they can turn against their government to change their policy or to resign. You have just compared Israel with ISIS.
No, I haven't. I don't see any comparison between.
It's going to be the headlines tomorrow. Piers Morgan, Israel is ISIS.
Only amongst people who weren't listening. The comparison, which is more apposite, is ISIS and Hamas. They are both nihilistic terror groups intent on killing as many Jewish people and others as they can possibly kill. And you can't get peace with people like that.
Absolutely. You know what? I'm going to do something that nobody done on your television. You know what I'm going to do on your episode? I'm going to pretend that I'm an Israeli citizen. I'm going to put myself in the place of an Israeli settler in the kibbutz. And I want to speak to my Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, I have voted for you because you have promised us peace and prosperity and security. On the 7th of October, those son of bitches Hamas, they went into the fence that is regularly heavily guarded. Usually if there's like a dove that comes close to it, it will be shot. Those people went in and they went for 6 hours before IDF forces was deployed, killing
some areas it was 10 hours.
Our friends, our families, kidnapping our grandmothers and babies, and went in. I want to ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, after you have fractured the Israeli community and you have fucked our courts, our Supreme Courts? What are you doing with the money being given to you, to the United States? Also, you are carpet bombing Gaza with absolutely no regard to our hostages, our people. I heard a rumor in the kibbutz that you're doing that you let that happen as an excuse to carpet bomb Gaza, so you push them into Sinai. And I didn't believe that. That's like, not my prime minister. He can never do that. And then I watched an interview for Danny Ayalon. He was your chief advisor. He was also the Israeli ambassador to the United States. And you know what he said, Mr. Prime Minister? He said that the solution for those Palestinians is to go into a vast land of Sinai and live into tent cities temporarily, temporarily, wink, wink, until we build Gaza again, and then we invite you back. يعني عبط احنا بقى. يعني فاهمني؟ We've seen this movie before. So, يعني, and when I saw this, I couldn't explain to my fellows in the kibbutz, how come our Israeli government is trading human lives for another piece of land? So as an Israeli citizen, I need to hold my Israeli government accountable. And as an American citizen, I want to know, all of these money that we are giving to Israel, we're giving them $4 billion every year. Joe Biden said it's the best investment America ever done. Well, if I am in the place of Joe Biden, I would say, sorry, don't speak. I would say, if I was Joe Biden, I would go down and whisper in the ears of Netanyahu and tell them, I hate bad investments. They haunt me, like Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. But the thing is, this is the problem. Israel always victimizes itself, and I have never seen a victim putting their oppressor under siege and bombing them 24/7. Israel wants you to believe that they are the victim. But dealing with Israel is so difficult. It's like being in a relationship with a narcissistic psychopath. He fucks you up, and then he makes you think it's your fault.
All right,
you
Bassem.
Look at Israel as Superman, but they're really Homelander.
Bassem.
Wallahi, they are shooting.
Bassem.
What's all these pop culture references? What is all with these pop culture references?
I want to say one thing.
And they are annoyed with the splashes.
Bassem, I want to say two things. One, if you could just slightly manage your language. We are uncensored, but if you keep swearing.
Hamas is more like Darth Vader. And Israel is more of a Darth Maul when you think, like, I don't know.
Sorry.
We have to apologize.
Man, the Reddit needing to compare every geopolitical conflict to pop culture media that extends into cable TV.
Apologize to viewers who may be offended by that.
I apologize.
But I understand passions run high, so let's not get too bogged down about the odd swear word.
I apologize to the viewers. I apologize to the viewers for my language.
My second question is this.
After the sight of dead civilians.
After the break, we have the managing director of the Daily Wire, which is Ben Shapiro's company. We were going to interview him on his own, but he's happy to come on and talk with you directly if you are prepared to stay.
Well, of course, I can stay, but again, I am I am in a disadvantage, and I would like to have my space to respond.
Okay, we'll come back after the break.
Because here's the thing. There's two things
we're going to go to a break.
All right.
When we come back from the break, we'll be you and Jeremy Boring from the Daily Wire.
I have news.
We're taking a short break, Bassem. I'll be back. Welcome back to Uncensored. For more on the situation in Israel, I'm joined now by the CEO and co-founder of the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's partner, Jeremy Boring. Jeremy, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'm sorry we
name is actually boring. But also, this is the guy that did that article, did that read of the contract that the Daily Wire proposed to Steven Crowder. This is the guy who read out all the terms of the contract. It's like, man, we offered him a lot of money. I don't know what he's complaining about. I don't know why he's whining and whinging. I remember that's the only reason I know who this guy is. He was that guy. He was the guy who read out Steven Crowder's contract.
Demoted you earlier to mere MD. You are the CEO and co-founder. You know Ben Shapiro better than anyone, really. I did a big interview with Ben, obviously, the other night, which went around the world and has sparked a big reaction, including from our guest, Bassem Youssef, who's still with us. First of all, you've been listening to Bassem and what he's been saying. What's your response?
Well, first of all, I make it a point not to speak for Ben Shapiro. He's got a 20 IQ points on me and speaks for a living professionally, so he's much better prepared to defend himself. But as his business partner, as
20 IQ points on me, okay,
as his best friend, I do feel like I have to respond to the things that Bassem was just saying. First of all, the question of how many sons of bitches have to be killed in order to end this conflict, I suppose that the answer is as many of them as it takes. That doesn't mean that I or Ben or any decent person in their right mind is happy with the killing of civilians. I posted at the very beginning of this conflict that a woman or a child blown apart in Gaza is just as tragic as a Jewish baby killed in one of the settlements. That doesn't mean that Israel's actions and the actions of Hamas are morally equivalent. You know, the tragedy is the tragedy, but the moral equivalency is nonsense. If you entered Israel with the express purpose of targeting and murdering civilians with your own hands in cold blood, that is not comparable to Israel bombing targets in the Gaza Strip and killing civilians as a terrible, tragic consequence. War is terrible. War is an awful thing. That's why decent people don't lightly engage in war, and why Hamas should not have incited this war. You know, we can talk about the history of the Israeli conflict. I'm not a professional political commentator. I'm a CEO. I'm a screenwriter, and I'm certainly not Ben Shapiro. I'm not here to discuss the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but we all saw what happened on October 7th. And the idea that Israel was not going to react severely to that, or that Israel should not react severely to that, is ludicrous. And
Jeremy,
the idea that Ben Shapiro should be a moderating voice, that Ben Shapiro should be, saying, no, Israel should not respond in this situation, that's nonsense.
Let me ask you though, Jeremy, the question which I think is the big question, what is a proportionate response to that outrage on October the 7th, which is the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust? What is proportionate? If it's true, as reports are suggesting tonight, that there may have been a hospital hit by an Israeli strike and up to 500 people or more have died, that would seem to me, if that is verified, and it's not verified yet, you know, we don't know exactly what has happened other than there's been a hit on this hospital. But if that is verified to have been an Israeli strike, that will strike many people as disproportionate.
Certainly. But first of all, I don't know what a proportionate response is or why we would want it. I suppose a proportionate response would be for 3,000 Israelis to go through the fence, gun down innocent Palestinian women and children, burn their bodies, burn them alive, take hostages, rape their women. No one wants a proportionate response. No moral person could possibly call for a proportionate response. The purpose of war is to defeat your enemy. The West has, in my lifetime, forgotten the purpose of war because the true cost of war is so terrible. The last time the West engaged in war and won it was World War II, and they did it through incredible brutality. They did it by bringing their enemies to heel. That is not a thing to That's not a thing to rah-rah about. That's not a thing to look forward to. As I said, all decent people should avoid war. But I think the sort of lie of the post-World War II, the post-war consensus lie, is that somehow war in which you kill a bunch of people and don't secure victory is morally superior to war where you do secure victory. I would say that the only way to morally justify a war is to win it. Otherwise, the very argument that brought you into the war, this enemy must be defeated, ends up being proven a lie. I mean, Afghanistan, I think...
Okay, so there's a few things I want to say. First off, I understand what he's trying to get at, but proportionality isn't just a question of, you know, oh, we responded, we've killed just as many of them as they've killed as us. Like, that's how proportionality works. When somebody talks about proportionality, I think it's a question of making sure that the consequences for said actions are sufficient enough to dissuade further attempts at violence that Hamas tried to engage in, while also making sure it doesn't go overboard and then needlessly kill civilians that did not need to die, or it spirals the violence further, causing more death than is necessary. Now, if the argument is made that there will never be peace until Hamas is gone, if that is the argument, then you could make the case for entering the Gaza Strip. But then the question becomes no longer about proportionality. It becomes about victory and how we define victory. Because I can imagine a world, it's going to be at a heavy cost, but I can imagine a world where Israel takes over the Gaza Strip militarily, props up the Israeli flag, says, hooray, hooray, hurrah, and they have begun the occupation. What then? Because victory against the terrorist organization, and that's how the writers at the Daily Wire classify Hamas, they classify them as a terrorist organization, is not as simple as just taking this territory, because they could go into exile. There's other groups like Palestinian Islamic Jihad who would like to rule in their place. And if you do not create something that is sustainable for Palestinians, you do not find a way to lower the unemployment rate, you do not find a way to allow them to govern themselves, you do not find a way to deal with the illegal occupation in the West Bank, what you might end up doing is causing a bunch of deaths, then leaving Gaza eventually, And then Palestinian Islamic Jihad takes over, or Hamas retakes over, or some other group. I don't know, like who knows what group could prop up and then pop up in the next 5 to 10 years. And then you've achieved nothing. And then all that death and all that destruction was for nothing. And so do we believe that Netanyahu's government is going to be the one to fill that power vacuum properly once they leave? Do we believe that the Blue and White Party, if they were to take over in his stead, that they could do it? Benny Gantz? Do we believe anyone in Netanyahu's coalition, or even his quote-unquote unity government, which is only supposed to last until the end of these hostilities? I guess the open combat hostilities. What are they going to do? Are they going to nation build? Or are they going to ethnically cleanse? They could bring in Fatah. Okay. That is something that I think, might be easier for people to swallow. But I have yet to see a commitment to do that. I've yet to see any public comment about that plan. And we're getting reports from Axios suggesting that the Biden administration is privately pushing Netanyahu's government to give them a plan for post-occupation. Because America remembers Afghanistan. They're going through all the reports as to why it failed. And I think one of the conclusions that they've probably come to is, we should have had a plan beforehand, before we went in and busted everything up for what we do afterwards. And if the state of affairs that Israel creates, and I do not trust Netanyahu to rebalance the situation properly, if the state of affairs that Israel creates continues the blockade, continues the illegal occupation of the West Bank, and does not deal with issues like land right of return or any of the issues that are hurting Palestinians on a daily basis as a direct consequence of the occupation and of the siege of Gaza, then we're just going to end up here again a few decades down the line. And I think Netanyahu has shown through his security failures and his plan to keep the conflict continuing in perpetuity, that keeping the conflict going on in perpetuity is dangerous, not just for Palestinians, but Israelis as well.
America had every right to go into Afghanistan. The Taliban was harboring Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda flew planes into buildings in the United States, killed thousands of our citizens, brought the nation into untold agony, pain, and horror. America had every right morally to go in and destroy the Taliban and destroy Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, but I would argue,
the Taliban now rules in Afghanistan. The war was not won.
But that's my point, actually. I've done a column about this tonight for The Sun here in the UK, which is I was editor of a newspaper when the Iraq War happened. I opposed it very aggressively as the editor of the paper. And sadly, we were borne out by events. It was a complete disaster, the Iraq War, in my view. It was illegally contested, I think. And the consequences were appalling in terms of loss of life, 1 million people, in terms of ISIS being allowed to breed and create their merry hell around the world, in terms of complete dismantlement of Iraq itself as a functioning country. And I think Afghanistan, again, 20 years of attacking an enemy, which is now running the country again, seemed to me, again, to be kind of pointless. And I do wonder whether Israel, in its blind fury, which I completely understand, has thought through the consequences of actually launching a full air, ground and sea offensive into Gaza as to actually what happens at the end of that.
Well, I suppose Israel wasn't really given the opportunity to fully contemplate what the consequences of that action might be, because Israel didn't instigate this war. This war was instigated by a horrible terrorist attack on Israel, and a state is put in a position where it has to respond. Now, one might argue that the very fact that Israel has yet to actually launch their ground invasion means that they are actually making a calculation about what the cost will be, what victory looks like. Any rational person, any decent person can engage in a conversation.
I mean, that's speculation, but that could be happening.
About what is the appropriate response for Israel. Of course they can. But this sort of moral equivalency thing, I don't think is a sign of decency to engage in a conversation about moral equivalency.
Let me bring Bassem back in. You've been listening to this, Bassem. What's your response to what Jeremy's been saying?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the gentleman's name.
It's Jeremy Boring. He's the chief executive of the Daily Wire and co-founder with Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire.
Hi, Jeremy. Please say hello to Ben Shapiro, and please tell him that I do think he is the smartest person to ever walk the earth. Thank you so much. So, as response to Jeremy, I agree with everything you said. I mean, what is disproportionate? I mean, he just used the examples from Second World War and America, showing that civilian casualty is. I mean, I heard his voice. He was very sad, and as he was telling us, it is so inevitable to kill so many civilians because it's something that we cannot avoid. I hear the sadness in his voice, and I know that it's a very difficult decision to kill all of these civilians because that's for a higher cause, and I understand. But my question, I have two questions. The question is,
why is he shaking his head? Why is he hasn't even objected to anyway. He's that I don't look. It's kind of hard to tell when with the obvious satire come on. I mean, a little bit. Yeah, you can hear the tone a little bit. But I mean, he hasn't even gotten to the question yet. He knows something. Yeah, there's something coming, of course.
Is how can you justify the killing in the West Bank where Hamas does not exist? And if the disproportionate response during over all of these years have actually worked, what will be new this time that did not happen before? I just want to.
Those are two really good questions. And fair questions. They're not unfair.
That was my question.
Okay,
that was my question.
I'm gonna.
Okay.
So
now, if I ask the question, can I say something on my side?
Well, Bassem, with respect,
a little bit personal.
Bassem, with respect, I gave you half the show to have your side. Jeremy's had a lot less time. I'm going to have to.
You want me to leave?
Bassem, I'm going to have to let you go because we've been on air with you for 40 minutes.
Oh, okay. Bye bye.
But listen,
bye.
I'd like to talk to you again, and thank you for joining the program. I appreciate it.
Oh, by the way, my wife's family is all right, and they sent us a house. It's bombed. It's beautiful. It's going to be a good like Halloween theme. So
well, I'm very sorry for what your family are going through in Gaza, and I mean that very sincerely.
By the way, I don't know. I don't know I don't know him. By the way, I haven't actually met them. They didn't even come to my wedding. They couldn't because they are stuck in Gaza, and she never saw them because Gaza is not a destination.
Bassem, as I say,
we hear their voices, and it's
really
they
dragging
die.
it. He's really dragging it.
Bassem, I wish your family all the very best. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
I don't. Thank you.
Wait, we didn't get to see his response? No. Well, that was a good segment, though. That was a good segment. It's cool to see that side of the conflict getting some airtime, because I don't see it much in the Western press. Certainly not with that type of a spin on it, too. The very dry style of humor. I'm surprised they let him on. I think he did a pretty good job. Of course, like the 5,000 number when he talked about the hospital bombing, obviously that was wrong. I do think sometimes, he was talking a little, not like talking too much broadly, but you need to let the host of the show host the show. That's something that does bother me as somebody who's had to be in Piers Morgan's position before, not hosting that type of show, but hosting debate shows. But broadly speaking, I think he did very, very well. And I think the questions that he put forward were good. I think he got busted up by the technical difficulties, but he played with it quite well as a comedian. Yeah, I think he did a fantastic job. This is the type of conversation I want to be seen on platforms like Fox, which had a debate like this between Cornel West and who was it? It was Cornel. Somebody in chat remind me. It was Cornel West and another guy, and it was just a mess. It was a terrible mess. They didn't get I didn't learn anything. We didn't get anything. Yeah, Alan Dershowitz. We didn't learn anything. Nobody who watched it learned anything. It was just all vitriol and yelling. And then Sean Hannity jumped in and piled on with Alan Dershowitz. And for whatever reason, it got a round of applause from the crowd there at the end. But I don't think it deserved it. This was much better. I think in part because they allotted more time, and so people could talk at length more instead of like the 15 minutes that Fox gave the debate on their network.